Good afternoon. My name is Sam Vasikaran. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. The theme of this webinar is Biomarkers across the spectrum of glycemia in metabolic syndrome. We got two eminent speakers today. The first speaker is Dr. Deepak Bachwani, and the second speaker is Dr. Hassan Bayat. Dr. Deepak Bachwani will speak on cellular and molecular biomarkers of metabolic syndrome. Dr. Bachwani is biochemistry professor at AIIMS Rajkot, is a prominent figure in clinical biochemistry and molecular biology with over 23 years experience and has numerous publications in various journals. He serves on APFCB's Communication and Publication Committee. He's Associate Editor of APFCB News and is a state representative in the Association of Clinical Biochemistry of India. His talk will be followed by Dr. Hassan Bayat, and he will speak on HbA1c standardization, analytical performance, and recent takes from the diagnostic approach. Dr. Bayat holds a doctorate in clinical laboratory science from Beheshti University, Tehran, and is the chair of the Iranian accreditation body for medical laboratories. He represents IACLD at APFCB, serves as APFCB auditor, and is a member of CLSI and IFCC panels. Dr. Bayat has delivered international lectures, co-edited a Six Sigma issue, and hosted webinars for Westcard QC Inc. So I invite the first speaker, Dr. Deepak Bachwani, to start his lecture. Thank you.
Nice introduction. So in this talk, I will give you an insight about the recent updates that are in the preview of a metabolic syndrome with its cellular and molecular biomarkers. Now, over the last 2 to 3 decades, disease patterns are undergoing rapid structural changes in a sense that there is an increase in the burden of non-communicable disease compared to the communicable one. And this phenomena of epidemiological transition is substantiated by the data presented by the Global Burden of a Disease study, indicating that 60% of the total mortality across the world is contributed by NCDs. And major factor contributing to this development of NCDs includes the tobacco and alcohol use, hyperglycemia, dietary habits, dyslipidemia, obesity, high blood pressure, and so on. Now, out of these, the high blood pressure, dyslipidemia, obesity, and hyperglycemia, they are studied together under a one head, that is metabolic syndrome. And what we call that metabolic syndrome, it is a constellation of metabolic abnormalities characterized by android obesity, abnormal glucose metabolism, insulin resistance, hypertension, and dyslipidemia. Now, each of these factors, they are known factors for atherosclerotic disease, but when they are collectively present, they account for most of the ongoing pandemic of obesity-related morbidity and mortality. Based on this, WHO and other working group proposed and published the concept of a metabolic syndrome as a group of five variables, that is obesity, hyperglycemia, hypertriglyceridemia, low HDL, and an hypertension, for an easy clinical approximation to suspect and treat and increase cardiometabolic risk. And for the quantification of metabolic syndrome, various diagnostic criteria have been proposed. Now, these diagnostic criteria from time to time, over a period of time, various associations, various working bodies have given it. They differ on their certain aspect but have a similarities in many. Considering this, a joint statement issued by the WHO, International Diabetes Federation, American Heart Association, National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute, given it in the year 2009. According to them, they have formulated criteria to diagnose the metabolic syndrome, includes that out of these three or more of following condition, if it is satisfied, the person can be categorized as a metabolic syndrome, and those criteria include if the waist circumference is more than 90 centimeter in a male or more than 80 centimeter in a female, serum Tg level if it is equal to or greater than 150 milligram per deciliter or on the treatment, HDL cholesterol if it is less than 40 milligram per deciliter in male and less than 50 milligram per deciliter in female or on treatment, systolic and diastolic blood pressure respectively if it is equal or greater than 135 millimeter of mercury or 85 millimeter of mercury or on hypertensive medication, and fasting plasma glucose more than 100 milligram per deciliter or hypoglycemic drug. So various working groups provided the different criteria. So it clearly indicates that there is a variation, but all these variations are quantitative, not on the qualitative base, in a sense that all are harmonizing the complementary concept of a metabolic syndrome as a good clinical window to look for the insulin resistance and the underlying manifestations. And this clinical window remains a critical point considering the prevalence of this trait. Although metabolic syndrome, it is known for decades, it has become increasingly relevant in recent time, considering primarily because of the exponential increase in the obesity worldwide. If we just take the data of a last decade, from 2010 to 2020, the prevalence of obesity in a general, in overall population on a global basis, it was found that it has increased from 9.8% to 13.2%, approximately a 50% increase. And this increase in prevalence, it is soaring across all the age group, right from beginning from 2 to 5 years to ending up to 65 to 74 years. Thereafter, it is a slight decrease, it is found. Now, several studies across the worldwide have reported a different degree, different variation in the metabolic syndrome as far as prevalence is concerned, that range from 10 to 84%. And it largely depends upon the ethnicity, age, gender, and race of a population. So this is a big variation. So on a global basis, general information that is provided that for an adult population, the estimated prevalence is somewhere between 20 to 25%, while in children it goes up to the 19.2%. However, the most disturbing data is that by the year 2020, there will be increase of almost 150%. Now, this actually demands a mechanical insights and look for the biomarker which can provide an early indication of the condition. Now, of all the proposed mechanism, three etiologies are seen to be the most plausible, that are insulin resistance, neurohormonal activation, and a chronic inflammation that sets in. Now, each of these proposed mechanism has their own marker which are individual or maybe linked with each other. But the common determining or primary trigger that for all these three proposed mechanism is visceral adiposity, as it has been substantiated by the murine studies as well. Insulin resistance, that is inability of insulin to stimulate glucose disposal, impairs the insulin mediated inhibition of lipolysis, leading to increase in circulating free fatty acids. Now these free fatty acids inhibits the protein kinase activation in muscles, leads to reduced glucose uptake. It causes increase in protein kinase activation in liver that promotes the lipogenesis and gluconeogenesis. So net effect is there's a creation of hyperinsulinemic state. This IR that is developed, it further contributes to the development of hypertension due to loss of vasodilator effect of insulin, vasoconstriction that is caused by the circulating free fatty acids, and there is increased sympathetic activation and sodium reabsorption in the kidney. It also increases the serum viscosity and the release of certain pro-inflammatory cytokine from the adipose tissue. And the animal and human studies have provided the fact that visceral fat deposit contribute more to the insulin resistance compared to the subcutaneous fat. Among the neurohormonal activation, the second proposed mechanism that has been suggested and accepted by the scientific community, it is that adipocytokines, primary leptin and adiponectin has been closely and strongly linked with the adipose tissue mass. Among the renin-angiotensin system, its metabolic effector, that is angiotensin 2, it is found to be closely related with the obesity and insulin resistance. And once angiotensin 2 is released in an increased amount, it causes activation of type 1 receptor, which then activates NADP oxidase that lead to generation of reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species then produces a multitude of effects that includes the oxidation of LDL, endothelial injury, platelet aggregation, expression of redox sensitive transcription factor, that is NF-kappa B cells, and expression of lectin-like oxidized LDL receptor 1. All these three individually and as a cumulative effect, that is RAS, ROS and LOX1, have an interrelated positive feedback loop that actually initiates a vicious cycle of inflammation, endothelial damage and fibroblast proliferation that contributes to the development of individual component of metabolic syndrome or as a whole. All these pathway, all these activation of various pro-atherogenic pathway in metabolic syndrome, they finally leads to inflammation that then leads to clinical manifestations of metabolic syndrome. During this process, various inflammatory markers have been released. Certain markers are just the bystanders, that is the result of the inflammation. Other not only are only the markers, but they play a causative role also. One of it is tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is released by the macrophages within the adipose tissue. Once it is released, it also causes phosphorylation and inactivation of insulin receptor in the adipose tissue, further actually increases the insulin resistance, which in turn releases a free fatty acid, and this vicious cycle keeps on going. Along with the tumor necrosis factor, adipose tissue also releases interleukin 6, which is closely related with the mass of body fat and insulin resistance. As it gets released, it increases fibrinogen level in the body, causing a prothrombotic state. Also, it promotes adhesion molecule expression by endothelial cells and activation of local RAS pathway. In the liver, bone marrow, and in other tissues at other sites, it also causes the release of C-reactive protein. So these three possible mechanisms that have been suggested and accepted, they cause the release of various biomolecules, which not only act as a biomarker, but has a causative factor as well. But over last 2 to 3 decades, heritable studies suggested that not only these metabolic biomarker, but genetic factors also contribute to the familial aggregation of metabolic syndrome with a heritability factor of about 10 to 42%. And a genome-wide scanning have recognized that several genetic loci that are specifically for the metabolic syndrome, they are located primarily on chromosome number 1, 2, 3, 7 and 16. Now, first of the heritable study, it was performed in the population of Indian Asian men, where approximately more than 3 lakhs SNPs were genotypes in 2,700 individuals in stage 1. In phase 2, out of those 3,17,000 SNP, 15,000 SNPs were comprehensively evaluated in 2,300 individual. But fact it was, or result was surprising, that all these SNPs doesn't have a common genetic basis for the metabolic syndrome. At the maximum, they were related with the two metabolic traits. Now, subsequent study, or rather a significant breakthrough happened when a study happens in a European population which examined the about 2.5 million SNPs as a whole or part with the pairs in about 22,000 individual, and they reported that 27 variants are associated with combination of pair of traits, maybe two, maybe three, but the five variants or five loci, they were directly related with the metabolic syndrome. Those five loci that were identified, it was cholesterol ester transfer protein, lipoprotein lipase, apoprotein A, zinc protein, and BUT13 homology. Subsequent studies added by the microchip genotype array analysis identified additional loci that were major, that were identified were fat and obesity associated genotype. Overall, these studies indicated that a genetic factor influences each individual component as well as the syndrome itself. But it was found that there is a strong lipid and obesity element, substantiating the fact that visceral obesity plays a predominant role in the initiation and the progression of a metabolic syndrome. If we talk about the individual trait of a metabolic syndrome on a genetic basis, it is found that obesity has some 56 loci, lipids are associated or linked with some 157 loci, over 90 loci has been associated with the hypertension, and for type 2 DM, there are hyperglycemia, there are numerous loci, but they are individual. When we talk about collective as a metabolic syndrome, then these 27 variants, they were found in a number of studies through analysis, through microarray analysis, that these 27 were directly linked with the metabolic syndrome. We'll just try to look at some of those variants which can be analyzed in common laboratories also. First one as a lipoprotein lipase gene. Now this gene, it is located on chromosome 8, has 8 different 10 different exons and numerous mutation that includes, that is in the coding as well as in the non-coding region, have been identified. However, two SNPs, namely that 295 number reference ID and reference ID 301, are found to be directly linked with the metabolic syndrome. Reference ID 295 SNP, it is located about 533 base stream upstream of the start of a transcription somewhere in the promoter region. Additionally, they have a high frequency of short tandem repeat polymorphism also, but it doesn't found to be directly linked with the metabolic syndrome. Second genetic parameter that is closely linked with the metabolic syndrome, it is fat and obesity associated gene, which is located on chromosome 16. Now it is extensively expressed in adipose tissue and the skeletal muscle of a human tissue. With the highest expression, it is found in the hypothalamus, as it is the region that controls the energy balance, namely at the arcuate nucleus, which indicates that it plays a critical role in regulating appetite and energy metabolism. In this fat and obesity associated gene, some 29 different SNPs were significantly found to be associated with more than one phenotype domain of metabolic syndrome, but directly with all component of a metabolic syndrome. 5 different SNPs were found. These are the reference IDs that are found to be directly linked with the metabolic syndrome. Another important parameter, genetic parameter, it is glucokinase and its receptor. That is glucokinase, it's a glucose phosphorylating enzyme specifically expressed in liver and the pancreas in the beta cell of a Langerhans. Now there, one specific regulatory protein, it is present, GCKR. Now GCKR, its location, it is on chromosome 2nd. Now common functional variant of glucose kinase receptor with a reference ID, this is 780094 and 2603266. It is found to be associated with fasting plasma glucose, insulin level, and with both increased serum triglyceride and low density lipoprotein level. So they are found to be closely linked with the metabolic syndrome. Other component as a lipoprotein A5 gene, which is located on chromosome 11. Now, human ApoA5 gene, it has a 4 exome and it is located as said on chromosome 11, and it is expressed at a several different lipoproteins level. Now, two specific polymorphism, which is one in the promoter region and other in the exome 3, respectively as 1131 upstream, where this T to C conversion happens, and at at the 56th position of an exome, where cytosine to guanine replacement it is happening, they are found to be associated with the metabolic syndrome. Other variants were also found in the ApoA5 gene, namely 1131 plus 461259 and 56G, but they were not associated with the hyperglycemic level, they were associated with the dyslipidemia and the obesity level. Now, leptin and leptin receptor, from years they have been a sort of an interest considering their role in the energy metabolism. With the leptin gene, again a highly variable tetranucleotide microsatellite repeat which flanks the 3' region has been identified and linked with the obesity related phenotype. Along with this tetranucleotide microsatellite, which actually was a very novel finding, that no such findings were previously identified, that is associated with a syndromic condition. Along with this tetranucleotide repeat, G to A at 2548 position and plus 19 Ag polymorphism has been found to be linked with. Same with the leptin receptor gene, which is located on chromosome 1, a single nucleotide polymorphism with substitution of guanine to adenine in exon 6 at a 668 position, where a replacement of arginine to glutamine occurs, has been described that is closely linked with the metabolic syndrome, as it decreases that binding capacity of a leptin. As a result, signal doesn't go as it is required, so it is associated with the pathogenesis of metabolic syndrome, obesity, insulin resistance, and a hyperglycemic state. Now, these were that were directly linked with the different parameters, with the different attributes that are associated with the metabolic syndrome. Along with it, there is a cluster located on chromosome 9, cluster of gene that is located on a chromosome 19 as ApoE, ApoC1, ApoC4, and ApoC2. Out of this, that ApoC1 region, it is found to be highly vulnerable when these A to G substitution it is happening, or when this insertion or deletion polymorphism it is happening at a 317 site. Individual with these type of genetic makeup, in which this 331 site where this insertion deletion polymorphism is happening, or at this site where this A to G transition it is happening, they were found to be highly vulnerable, highly susceptible for the metabolic syndrome condition. Other important and significant genes that are actually linked with the signaling pathway but has been associated with the metabolic syndrome, it is zinc finger protein 259 gene. It is an essential regulatory protein that is responsible for normal cell proliferation and signal transduction. It is located on chromosome 11, and it's a 2 variant where C to G transition occur or C to T transition occur. See, here is a reference allele. If these minor allele have been replaced for this major allele, then it is found individual have a high susceptibility towards the metabolic syndrome condition. Along with the zinc finger protein, ATP binding cassette, subfamily B, member 11, the product of this gene, it is a ABC transporter protein which is responsible for bile cell export pump. So mainly it is helping the cholesterol metabolism regulation, but somehow it is found to be associated with the other components of the metabolic syndrome as well. Along with this, as I said, that this BUT13 gene, in fact, it was the first gene that was first made responsible for a direct involvement in the metabolic syndrome cases. Along with this, phospholipase C gene and breast cancer suppressor protein is directly linked with the cytosolic protein for the signaling defect. Now, this BRAP activated inflammatory cascade, it acts by regulating the NF-kappa B cell nuclear translocation and was found to be involved in the inflammatory pathway. Therefore, genetic variant also contribute in this to the disease susceptibility of carotid atherosclerosis. So what we can sort it out, that along with the metabolic factors, different inflammatory markers that we have been seeking since decades. There are many genetic factors that not only as a biomarker but as a causative agent also have been suggested in recent time. So what we can conclude that metabolic syndrome, it is a oligogenic state where multiple genes participate, and they get expressed when it is modulated by a multiple modifier gene and the environmental factors. So what we need as a society, that first step in the management of metabolic syndrome to identification of a polymorphic DNA marker. Now this may vary from region to region across the globe. Certain polymorphic variant may be more common in a certain region, may not be in other. So on a region wise, we need to identify the polymorphic DNA marker. Once it is identified, then screening need to be done on a large basis. Screening of especially the affected family in which metabolic syndrome it is running, even if not metabolic syndrome, diabetes or hypertension, if two of the traits are coming, we need to screen over this. Once a screening of a family is in this, we may able to identify, and a proper genetic counseling for the metabolic syndrome can be done. Thank you. Now I request our second speaker, Dr. Hassan Bayat, to have a talk on the title HbA1c standardization, analytical performance, and recent takes from the diagnostic approach. Dr. Hassan, please.
Okay, while we are waiting for Dr. Bayat, there is a question for Dr. Pachwani, and I'll read that question. So the reason lifestyle changes also play a crucial role in metabolic syndrome. What is your view on this? How to address this as a GP?
Yes, I mean, whatever these genetic involvements are there, until unless environmental factor will not be there, those genes will not be expressed. What we saw in a heritable studies that was performed in early 2000 and late 1900s, that a heritable factor rate is only about 10 to
Also,
42%. So if lifestyle modifications are controlled, if lifestyle modifications are done, if dietary and lifestyle changes are done, those genes completely cannot expressed. These require an susceptible environment to express. Otherwise, as I said, those, all the polymorphism or all the insertion deletions that are associated, they are in the form of a minor allele. They are not a major allele still in our society. So they need a medium to express. So all these, the individual components of a metabolic syndrome or as a whole, they need a susceptible environment which can be delayed or can be controlled if the lifestyle and dietary habits are to be controlled. Thank you.
Dr. Bayat, are you able to speak now? Okay, there are other questions. I'll read them out. I would like to know which method would be most appropriate for identifying DNA variants, considering the genetic heterogeneity in Indians. Also, is there a panel of variants that can be analyzed for the metabolic syndrome? I suppose this is a question specific to the Indian population.
Do you hear me there? Can I continue?
Yeah, Dr. Hassan, please proceed.
Okay. I'm going to close my camera to increase the speed. Let's look at pairs and non-important this in the globe, probably to rise to about more than 800 million by 2045. And most important is that about 50% of these people are living in low and middle income countries that, of course, some of those countries are in our Asia Pacific region. And diabetes is a leading cause of this, with more than 6 million deaths related to diabetes annually. So, because of importance of diabetes, it's important to diagnose this. And in this map, we see the spread of patients diagnosed with diabetes on the globe. And these ovals show countries in our region in Asia Pacific that unfortunately, as we see, it's anticipated to have a high soar in the number of diabetics in the future years. So diagnosing diabetes is important because unfortunately half of the patients at present are not diagnosed. Therefore, there is a delay about 7 years between the onset of diabetes and diagnosis. And this leads to the situation that when diabetes is diagnosed, unfortunately, 25 to 30% of patients are diagnosed with irreversible complications. And the good news is that if we diagnose diabetes, treatment can reduce complications significantly. As you know, there are several criteria to diagnose diabetes published by expert organizations, including American Association of Diabetes, and HbA1c is one of the most important criteria to diagnose diabetes. HbA1c is important because it's used for screening and diagnosing diabetes, for monitoring diabetes. It's an independent parameter in metabolic control. More important, HbA1c is a surrogate marker for risk assessment, for development of complication, both microvascular and macrovascular complication. Also, it's treatment goals are based on HbA1c values. And it's also an independent risk factor for non-people without diabetes, and also to assess quality of diabetes care. The first study is looking at the relationship between hemoglobin A1c values and complications, especially microvascular complications, was two large studies. The first one was diabetic complications and control trial that looked at type 1 diabetes to see what happens to people if we try severe treatment to reduce the blood glucose levels lower than traditional treatment. And then the United Kingdom preventive diabetes study, who looked at type 2 diabetes. And both of these found that there is a relationship between the value of hemoglobin A1c in blood and different complications comprising retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy, and microalbuminuria. So given the importance of these findings, manufacturers started to provide laboratories with commercially method for assessing hemoglobin A1c. And then in 1988, American Diabetes Association recommended routine monitoring of patients with diabetes by testing hemoglobin A1c. But there was an obstacle to care completely, and that was the fact that back at that time, there were 30 measurements that were tested as glycated hemoglobin, comprising total glycated hemoglobin, hemoglobin A1, and only about 50% of the laboratories were reporting hemoglobin A1c. And even the other problem was that even within the same category of the method, there was a large reproducibility, a large imprecision between different laboratories, as is seen in this figure at the right. So it was deemed to standardize methods so that it was possible to use uniform clinical guidelines, uniform thresholds and decision values, and also make it possible to compare different data obtained from different studies, so that patient results can be compared to each other despite where it is done, in which laboratory, and when over the time. So we can have commutability across the places, across the time, and across the laboratories and methods. To satisfy this, in 1992, American Association of Clinical Chemistry developed a subcommittee on the standardization of hemoglobin A1c. And then in the United States, the National Glycated Hemoglobin Standardization Program was initiated in 1996 to follow the AACC protocol. NGSP looked at DCCT study and UKPDS study, and because DCCT study was tested patient samples as hemoglobin A1c and had used Biomarkers 17 iron exchange SPLC, and UKPST also had adjusted its method against the DCCT study. Therefore, the NGSP decided to compare different methods in the market against the DCCT HPLC method. And this is the reason that back then HPLC was called the gold standard. Of course, it's not true now. In this picture, we see the NGSP structure, NGSP network structure that is, of course, related to IFCC standardization network. At the center of NGSP, there is a central laboratory, a central primary reference laboratory that is located in the United States. At present, there are two other primary reference laboratories, one in Japan and the other one in the Netherlands, that use the same method in the CPRL, meaning that they are using also HPLC, the DCCT HPLC, and in fact, these two laboratories are back up to the central primary reference laboratory. And in the peripheral, we have secondary reference laboratories that at present there are 6 of these laboratories around the globe with very important roles to transfer accuracy from the CPRL to routine methods and to routine laboratories. Secondary reference laboratories have 2 main activities. First is calibrating commercial manufacturers and also laboratories by providing them with fresh blood samples, and then present a certification program certifying annually manufacturers and the laboratories if they want. And finally, NGSP, via secondary reference laboratories, participates in perfusion testing schemes, for example, with CAP external quality assurance system. After several years of in the NGSP activity, in this review paper on 2011, the achievement of NGSP was studied, and the writers believe that NGSP has helped to change something that was chaos in the past to order in 2010. As seen in this picture, we see the chaos in the 1992 that became better and better over the years, so that in 2010, most of the laboratories were reporting hemoglobin A1C, and there was a big achievement, a big improvement in reducing reproducibility between the laboratories. So that in 2010, the all methods CV was reduced to 4%, and some methods, individual methods, had CVs lower than 3%, and even such some of the HPLC method had a good reproducibility less than 2%. This improvement has continued over the years. Luckily, for example, we see a report for the 2022 year, 2022 here, and also 2024 here, that we see over this year's more echoes in the all method series has gained, and also at the level of single methods, we have a better reproducibility at clinically important levels for risk assessment and for treatment of diabetes at this level, and also at level around 7. Okay, despite the fact that NGSP was very helpful in reduction of reproducibility, in alignment of different methods to DCC method, but it couldn't satisfy the metrological traceability and the European rules about traceability. Following the IVD directory in the Europe, it was demanded by this directory that the routine method be traceable, metrologically traceable to higher order reference method and methodologies, and also this was demanded by ISO 15189. Of course, these requirements was not possible to satisfy by NGSP because the DCCT HPLC method used in the NGSP is not a highly specific method, has some interference with interference, and therefore it's not a highly high order reference method, and also there is no pure reference material in this standardization program. In this picture, we see a typical hierarchy chain, traceability chain, metrological traceability chain. That is comprised an unbroken chain of methods and calibrators starting from pure reference materials, high order reference methods, and step by step, they go down to the laboratory level. And over this journey from higher levels to the laboratory, at all the steps, the uncertainty must be detected and added to each other to get the final uncertainty with the patient results. A hierarchy traceability chain comprises of 30 parts. At the top level, we have reference organizations that through several steps finally provide manufacturers with commutable reference materials. Then second part is manufacturers, IVD manufacturers that use the secondary reference materials to calibrate their selected reference measurement procedures, and finally provide end user calibrators to the laboratories. And at the last level, we have laboratories that use those calibrators to calibrate their methods and test patient samples. Okay. To satisfy metrological requirements, IFCC Working Group on Standardization of Hemoglobin A1C was established in 1995 and had two missions. First, to define the measurement that we use as hemoglobin A1C to develop higher order reference measurement procedures and materials, and also provide secondary reference materials to manufacturers and laboratories. In this picture, we see how blood samples in the IFCC laboratories are converted to pure calibrators, pure reference materials that are provided to manufacturers and laboratories. And this picture shows 21 accredited laboratories around the globe that are participating in the IFCC standardization network for hemoglobin A1C. After the establishment of IFCC standardization program, there was several studies to compare IFCC results with the national standardization program in the United States, meaning with the NGSP, and also with the national standardization programs in Japan and in Sweden. In this picture, we see comparison between NGSP and with IFCC. As we see back then, IFCC was also reporting HbA1c results in person. And we see that the NGSP results were higher than in person, higher than the IFCC results. And this is the relationship between the percentages. As we see, there is a non-specific bias between NGSP method compared to IFCC method. Because of this non-specificity, the IFCC results, when presented in person, were smaller than, about 2 units smaller than NGSP results, and there was a concept that reporting IFCC results also in person would result in a confusion. Therefore, IFCC work group decided to choose SI units and report hemoglobin A1C at minimal per mole. To compare NGSP results to IFCC results, a 2-year study was developed over which 4 between network comparison was performed, and this master equations was obtained from this comparison, this equation, to convert IFCC results to the NGSP and vice versa. And this master equation is annually monitored by 2 inter-network studies each year to be sure that this master equation is still usable. Okay, at present, so we have 2 standards program, NGSP and IFCC, in some way different, but these 2 networks are complementary to each other. IFCC is in fact a harmonization program, literally not a standardization. It's a harmonization program. One advantage of it is that it defines acceptable limits based on clinical needs. On the other hand, IFCC network is makes traceable commercial methods, makes commercial method traceable to the higher order reference method, but it doesn't have no uncertainty limit. Therefore, these 2 networks are necessary to complement the field. Okay, the other achievement was in 2010 that the consensus made a statement published by 4 main organizations in the diabetic field. In this statement, there are several things. First one is that the hemoglobin A1C results must be standardized worldwide, both in reference system and reporting. Also, they claim that the only valid methodological method and anchor for standardization is the IFCC network. The results must be presented both in SI units and NGSP%, and there should be conversion tables and calculators accessible to practitioners. Also, editors of the journals are recommended to publish papers related to hemoglobin A1C in both units. And finally, the statement says that the only reportable term is this hemoglobin A1C. Note that estimated average glucose obtained from the ADEC study was not included in this statement because of the concern about high variability in the achievement of the derivation of this equation, but it was left to the local decisions to decide they want to report its estimated average glucose or not. At present, some countries, including my countries, in my country, some laboratories are reporting this. Okay.
Dear all participants, myself Dr. Pradeep Kumar Dabla, and on behalf of the team APFCB Communication and Publication Committee, I welcome you all and glad to introduce the APFCB webcast and e-learning program. This program was devised to share the dynamic content and interactive activities.
Okay. Also, it's important to have a standardization to be aligned to higher reference methods and procedure. But on the other hand, we need how well should we work. We need analytical performance goals or analytical performance specification. To satisfy this, the hemoglobin standardization work group of IFCC published this paper. They tried two different models, sigma-metric and biological variation, considering this that 38 and 48 are clinically important values for diagnosing this diabetes, and a change of 5 millimole per mole in the patient results into subsequent patient results triggers changing the treatment. Having these considerations, they looked at the sigma-metric goal. Having sigma-metric goal that is based on the total error model, the work group recommended that analytical total error to be 5 millimole per mole, and bias and imprecision combined to one single measure as sigma-metric using this equation. And the laboratories use the method that have at least 2 sigma or higher. 2 sigma or higher values assures that laboratories are producing results that at most have 5% defects. Also, the work group looked at the biologically derived total error and global total errors. Optimum, if they were going to recommend this ones, optimum a global total error would be 1.1, desirable 2.2, and minimum, the least one, 3.4. As we see, even the minimum criteria from biological data is tougher than the sigma metric. And this is the reason that work group decided to choose sigma metric. In this picture, we see different levels of sigma performance. This is for 2 sigma, and here we have an example, a laboratory working with a bias of 1 millimole per mole and a CV of 1.5% in the IFCC method. That gives us a sigma metric of 5.3. At the left, at the right, we have the biological variation model that we see this method that was very good here. If biological model is applied, can only meet the least minimum criteria. Okay, therefore the sigma metric goal is a clinical based goal. and have different applications at the level of single laboratories to decide about the performance of a single method, and also to decide about the performance of whole method through a big region or so in country or around the globe. But we have to keep in mind that this 5 millimole per mole is only an interim goal set by the IFCC. When it comes to different regions, to different countries, to different laboratories, there are other considerations, including the aim of the test, the environment that test is done, the technical limitations, economical limitations, and practical works, and also clinical needs. All this must be considered when a single laboratory or a single country, single region is deciding about allowable total hours. Then to looking at the patient safety resulting from the quality of our performance laboratories, the working group used the same model, sigma metric model, and did another study over which they looked at the probability of mistake diagnosis that results from the high bias and high imprecision added to the biological variation in our bodies and in the population, and also the mistakes in the monitoring of the patients, again from the high bias and high imprecision. Okay, and the end point is that internal quality control. Also, the methods, different methods are aligned to the higher order reference materials. Different organizations are supervising them. But when we choose a method to use in our laboratories, we need to control that in our laboratories based on different criteria. One of them is, for example, here accessible on the Westcard website, to choose individualized quality control based on our sigma metric. The better is sigma metric, the lower is the quality control, lower frequency of doing QC, a smaller number of QC materials tested in over each per each event, and also we can do QC after a large number of patient results. But on the other hand, if sigma metric is lower, we should use tougher QC method. And it's important to note that
2 more minutes, Dr. Wyatt. We have to finish soon. Thank you.
Yeah, last slide. Yeah. Also, 2 sigma is the least acceptable sigma level of quality recommended by IFCC, but 3.5 sigma is the least controllable quality in the laboratories. As a conclusion, HbA1c is an important biomarker for diabetes. Now the methods are standardized. There are clinical-based criteria we have based on total error sigma model. We have external quality and internal quality plans. At the end, I'd like to thank Dr. Erna Lentens-Westra for providing me with her slides. And thanks to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatt. And I would like to thank you for a comprehensive presentation. And I don't think there is time for any more questions. Therefore, I will hand you over to Dr. Pant, Vivek Pant, for a vote of thanks.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sam. On behalf of Communication and Publication Committee of the APFCV, it is my privilege and honor to deliver this vote of thanks. First and foremost, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to esteemed moderator Dr. Samuel Basikaran sir for skillfully guiding us through today's discussion, and your insightful moderation has kept this session engaging. And on top of that, it was very ensuring. You're very ensuring that the webinar was informative and enriching for all the attendees. And a special thanks to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Deepak Parchwani and Dr. Hassan Bayat, for sharing your valuable knowledge and expertise with us. Your presentation has truly added immense value to the program and provided us with key takeaways that will definitely enhance our understanding and practice in this field of clinical biochemistry. And we are honored to have had you with us today. I would like to also express sincere gratitude to our webinar sponsor, Qdels Ortho, for their generous support, which made this event possible. And a special thank goes to Ms. Shannon, technical head, for ensuring that the platform ran very smoothly without any glitches, and your technical team's professionalism and expertise were very crucial for the success of this event. Last but not the least, a special thank to Dr. Mayank Upadhyay, corporate representative from Qdels Ortho. And we look forward to continuing this fruitful collaboration. And before I conclude, I would like to remind everyone to stay tuned to our webinar platform from APFCV, and we'll in a short period of time, we will announce a different webinar. So we look forward to a participation in the upcoming session also, where we'll continue to foster our learning and collaboration across the Asia Pacific region. Thank you once again for making this event success, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.